Bob Herbert's OpEd.tv is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation with the support of Ann Ulnick. Hi, I'm Bob Herbert. Welcome to OpEd.tv. How terrible is the toll that gun violence is taking on America's children? More than 1,500 boys and girls below the age of 18 were killed in homicides, suicides, and accidental shootings last year. The New York Times tells us toddlers are discovering guns under piles of clothes and between couch cushions. Teenagers are obtaining untraceable ghost guns from online kits. Middle school students are carrying handguns for protection. And gun violence has only gone up during the pandemic. In other words, gun violence continues to be a peculiarly American plague. I'll ask my guest what's being done about all this and what still needs to be done. She's Erica Atwood, Senior Director of Philadelphia's Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety. Ms. Atwood, welcome. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Bob. It's good to be here. It's good to have this discussion.
So we've heard many horrifying gun stories, the mass shootings at schools, of course. But the Times also tells us about a teenage boy who was shot and killed with his grandmother in Oklahoma City, and a 14-year-old boy who shot and killed his 2-year-old nephew, and a 3-year-old boy who found a gun under a bed and shot himself in the stomach. Tell us, what's causing this madness, if you know? Why does the United States have so much more gun violence than any other so-called advanced nation?
So, Bob, I think the issue with the United States and gun violence is about the proliferation of gun ownership, the how folks really translate or identify with the Second Amendment rights, what it was intended to do versus what it does now, whether or not we need it now is up for a strong debate and has been debated. I think unique to Philadelphia, one of the issues that we have is because of our state laws, we are unable to create our own kind of jurisdiction, gun laws that support the safe and well-being of our children. We are not able to penalize folks for having ghost guns or privately made firearms. We're seeing guns from across the state come through straw purchasing. We have our ghost gun issues. We're now starting to see 3D printed guns. It's scary as a community member, as someone who cares for children and young people in our life, and someone who works in the city on this issue.
Gun violence has long been a problem in this country, of course, but it seems only to have gotten worse during the pandemic. Do you have a sense of why that's been the case?
I think it's a pressure cooker. I think that we had seen increases in gun violence across the country. If you start to look at numbers in 2015, 2016, you start to see some ebbs and flows, but it was kind of on the uprise. And when you have communities that are vulnerable to systemic oppression, you've got lack of access to quality healthcare, lack of ability to have economic mobility, so getting good jobs and having an opportunity to grow in those jobs. There's a lack of community connectivity in the ways that communities have experienced them before. There's a lot of displacement and transient nature in the neighborhoods that are experiencing gun violence, and just the quality access to healthcare and behavioral health and trauma supports don't exist in these neighborhoods. And you add then the easy access to guns that we're seeing over the last several years, it's a storm for disaster. And that's what we're seeing in our neighborhoods that have experienced issues generation over generation.
You know, I mentioned the mass shootings at schools, and they've gotten a lot of attention which is certainly understandable. But those are not the only kinds of tragic shootings that we see, and in fact, they're not even the majority. So many children are killed or maimed in shootings that get little or no coverage, actually. And so, can you talk a little bit about the kinds of things that you have to deal with in Philadelphia, and then many other jurisdictions across the country, and sometimes, particularly in large cities, also have to cope with?
Gun violence as an issue is horrible for anyone, but I think that we as a society have a tendency to not want to talk about and elevate those who are the greatest victims and or perpetrators of gun violence. I
Right.
think that we shy away from talking about the supports that young Black and Brown men need between the ages of 18 and 30. We want to talk about what happens in large school mass shootings, in Sandy Hook, because it feels horrible, and we want to have this empathy and the sympathy for children, but we also need to have empathy and sympathy for grown folks too. And what does it look like for us to really invest in a demographic that has been historically feared,
Right.
historically marginalized, historically neglected, in a way that actually elevates their beauty, their brilliance, and their opportunity. And if we've viewed young Black and Brown men as pariahs in our society, in how they're presented in media, and Opportunity Agenda did a study about the representation of Black males in media. So if you never met a Black man in your life and all you see is what you see on TV, you think that he's a pariah. And so how do we change that narrative? So not only that we see the value in them, but they also see that they see the value in them, and we can actually build opportunities for them to get out of the cycle of dysfunction and violence, and live up to their full potential.
You mentioned if you've never seen a Black man in your life. I spent many years traveling the country covering stories for the New York Times, and it's remarkable, the number of people you'll meet in communities who have literally no or almost no interaction with African Americans, or anyone who's essentially not white. It's pretty astonishing that that could still be the case in the 2000s.
And what's ridiculous, Bob, is it also happens in major cities. Philadelphia, in and of itself, I call it, it's not a melting pot, it's a patchwork quilt. And we live next door to each other, but don't cross the stitching, don't cross the lines. And there's not an opportunity to build kind of a safe and healthy communities together, and realize that the issue of gun violence, whether you see it or not, it impacts you. And it impacts you, maybe it impacts you financially, it impacts kind of your tax rate in your city, or it might impact how businesses are coming to your area. And so we have to think about it as a holistic issue that everybody should get engaged in some way, shape, form, or fashion.
Let's talk about your organization. It's Philadelphia's Office of Policy and Strategic Initiatives for Criminal Justice and Public Safety. That
It's a
is a
lot of words.
mouthful.
It's a lot of words. It's a lot of words.
But tell us the role that your organization plays in fighting gun violence.
Sure. So we are a cluster in our managing director's office, and depending upon what city you're from, it's the city manager. So it's the chief operating officer of the city of Philadelphia. I serve in a leadership role in that office, and we are chiefly responsible for the implementation of the city's gun violence reduction strategy and criminal justice reform efforts. And in my portfolio is Town Watch Integrated Services, the Office of Violence Prevention, the Office of Criminal Justice, the Office of Reentry Partnerships, and the Office of the Victim Advocate, which we're actually appointing our first victim advocate for the city today in City Council. And so we look at the issue of gun violence on a kind of a 360 holistic level, and really sticking to the tenets of prevention, intervention, enforcement, and reentry. And all of our offices have some impact in that, but there are those who are kind of strictly, kind of predominantly in those different lanes, and those kind of buckets for violence prevention and reduction are kind of a national frame for the work. And so we've worked with the Department of Justice, and the city of Philadelphia was formerly a part of the National Forum for Youth Violence Prevention. We are now a part of the White House's CVI initiative, or Community Violence Initiative. And so what we do is we organize all the investments, be it financial, policy, or programmatic, that have a direct impact on gun violence and criminal justice reform.
You had mentioned earlier that in terms of sort of the laws and requirements that you have in Philadelphia, you're at the mercy of the state to a great degree. And that's the case in many states and cities across the country. So if you think in terms of what cities, states, and the nation needs to be doing to seriously deter this gun violence, what are some of the things that you'd like to see happen?
Yeah, so a couple things. One, if we really want to see substantial change around the impact of gun violence in our communities, particularly for Philadelphia, we have to give pushback and change the preemption laws in the state that allow us to be the captains of our own ship in terms of how we keep our community safe. That doesn't mean that we want to do full-scale sweeps of hunting season and folks who are hobbyists, but we need to keep our children and our families safe in our city. Secondly, we have to stop treating gun violence like it is the undergirding issue. Gun violence is a symptom. It's a malignant symptom of generations of systems of oppression in communities of color. If we do not solve the root causes of poverty, lack of opportunity, poor education, poor infrastructure in these impacted communities, we're going to go through the cycle every 30 years. And I talk very openly and honestly about gun violence being a cancer. And if you're talking about the systemic issues and gun violence being a cancer, the issue of gun violence is the malignant tumor. And so if you remove the malignant tumor, there is still a whole bunch of other things you have to do to get well. You have to go through chemotherapy. You have to have diet changes. There are other therapies that you have to go through with your oncologist and with your doctor. If we're truly trying to heal communities from a public health lens, then we have to look at what are the root causes, what are the triage things that we need to do. And my job in our department is triage, but what is the true healing we really want to do for our communities of color?
Now, I agree with you that this issue is as complex and malignant as you're pointing out. But it almost seems like we're going backwards instead of making progress on this front. And one of the points that's I think is so important is the Supreme Court appears ready to make it more difficult for local communities to enact or maintain strong gun control laws. I see that as potentially catastrophic, but I'm a layperson. I'm not involved in this, for example, the way that you are. You talked to us a little bit about the implications of this impending Supreme Court ruling.
With the ruling from the Supreme Court, if it comes down that at a federal level, we will have less control of what happens in our communities, it ties our hand, and we as a country are saying it's okay for a generation of people every 30 years to wipe themselves out. And I don't think that's who we need to be as a society, and we need to be as a country. We need to have a lot more empathy for folks who don't share experiences as us. There's an opportunity here to have kind of common sense conversations about gun ownership and gun laws. We really need to support research. We need to support research around the implications it has on weaponizing yourselves as an individual citizen. and not relying on the law enforcement agencies that exist. I would love to hear how law enforcement will step up and talk about the lack of rule in their jurisdictions, and how that puts them at risk as well. I work in strong partnership with our police commissioner here. I have friends that are in law enforcement in other jurisdictions, and it doesn't help them either if it's a free-for-all with guns in our communities, regardless of what the community looks like. You can live in the middle of Montana or the heart of North Philadelphia. No police officer wants to look down a barrel of an AK-47.
I've dealt quite a bit with law enforcement over the years in covering news stories, not surprisingly. And one of the things that has seemed really consistent in my experience is that law enforcement professionals have almost always been in favor of more strong gun control legislation than conservatives, conservative politicians, and also a significant portion of the public. Is that the case in Philadelphia as well?
It is. It is. We have strong supports from our law enforcement agencies on numerous levels that really want to locally, we want to disband the preemption from the state. So we can work with our U.S. attorney, our district attorney, and our other law enforcement agencies to create common sense gun laws for our city. That's it. We just want to make sure folks in Philadelphians can be safe.
It seems like government at many levels, not so much the local level, but also the local level. But it seems like government has been dropping the ball for the longest time in terms of gun control. And if this continues, then it sort of leaves the field open to private citizens to try and organize and see what can be done to pressure government to do the right thing. What can ordinary men and women do if they're really concerned about gun violence? Do you have any suggestions on that front?
Absolutely. And so there are different entry points depending upon your comfort level. One is just be a vocal advocate for the statewide legislature of your where you live, and be a caller, be an emailer, be a handwriter, sit in on the sessions in your capital to support the change in laws in your city. If you want to get involved on a ground level or you need support, reach out to your version of me or that office or my office if you're here in Philadelphia to see what programs and supports exist for you or the young people in your life. And if this doesn't directly impact you, if you are one of our neighbors in one of our suburban counties, or you just don't have a day-to-day interaction with folks that are more vulnerable to gun violence, look for organizations that need support, that are doing good work on the ground, that are safe havens for young people, that provide mentorship, that provide behavioral health supports, and support those organizations. We have a partnership here with the Philadelphia Eagles called End Gun Violence Now, Stop Keeping Score. Between them and us, we have a list of amazing organizations across the region that are doing good work to create safe and healthy communities.
What's going on in the schools in Philadelphia? One, do you have a problem with kids bringing guns to school? And also, one of the things that I found to be among the saddest aspects of this gun problem is the fact that schools actually have to have drills to teach the kids what to do if someone comes into the school with a gun, or if there's some kind of gun violence that breaks out. So one, what's going on in the schools in Philadelphia? Yeah. And two, do you have those drills in Philadelphia's public schools?
So I will say, working in partnership with Chief Kevin Bethel, who is the Chief of School Safety, he's doing a really good job about changing policies that keep kids safe, but don't also traumatize them. And to my knowledge, we don't have shooter drills in our school district of Philadelphia. I could be wrong, but I've not heard of that. I know that we have had issues in the last year or so about shootings outside of schools and young people bringing guns to school, but it doesn't run rampant. I think that a lot of the coverage that you see what's happening in schools, unfortunately, if it bleeds, it leads. But there aren't stories about the good work that our school safety community is doing, principals are doing to support the young people who are the most vulnerable to gun violence. And I think that young people that I've seen are captains of their own agenda, and they are the ones who are being kind of strong leaders in how they want to be kept safe and how they want to advocate for policy changes and programs within their schools.
Do you think that the genie is out of the bottle, meaning that for the foreseeable future, there's little to no chance that we can tighten gun control laws?
I can't think like that. I can't. I just can't. I have to have some hope that somebody will have some sense, like, and we'll start to be able to really have a conversation and meaningful engagement, and folks will use the brains that God gave them, so we can work together to make sure that we have safe communities, make sure we're supporting our law enforcement partners, to make sure that we are reducing the impact to gun violence to our children. This is traumatic, and it's traumatic for all of us. And if we don't, if I lose hope that we're never gonna get better, then I should quit my job like right now. But I have to maintain that we can do something. And even if I'm a dung beetle and I'm just pushing a piece of crap up a hill, that's fine. But at least it's getting someplace.
Speaking of your job, talk a little bit about how you came to be so involved professionally in sort of public safety, as a public safety writ large, not just the gun issue. Was this something that you had always wanted to do, or did it just happen by accident? How did this occur?
It's a little, I'd say it's a combination of both. If you asked me, just a little bit about me. I grew up, I'm a Gen Xer. I grew up in Camden, New Jersey. And so if you understand New Jersey, you've ever heard about Camden, New Jersey, just imagine I grew up in the midst of the crack epidemic in Camden.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
And so if you asked me when I was 16 what I wanted to do, I would have told you I want to be, I was really inspired by Thurgood Marshall. I wanted to be a defense attorney for juveniles. And that was me at 17, not understanding kind of what the spectrum of opportunities could be in this field. And I had also veered off, and I was in communications, I was in production work. And so I had charted this different path in my 20s, but I feel like I am working in purpose, and in my career in working in city government for now 4 mayors in one way, shape, form, or fashion has led me back to really being focused on serving communities that look like the one that I grew up in. And so I grew up in Camden. My family is also in West Philadelphia. And so both in communities that are greatly impacted by the systemic issues I talked about earlier. So I always wanted to be some sort of beacon of light, of hope, to start to solve the issues I saw around me as a kid. And my career really started in this field, really started with community engagement and leading work locally and nationally for Mayor Michael Nutter, around race and equity issues as it pertains specifically to Black men. Black men and boys. And so I was kind of guiding that work as specialist for external affairs and community engagement, leading the work as the first director of Black male engagement for the city of Philadelphia. And so that was my entree point. It wasn't really about solving the issue of gun violence. It was about elevating the opportunities for marginalized communities. And that then translated to the issue that is gun violence. And I've done the work locally and nationally. I was a TA provider for an organization by the name of Cities United, which works with mayors around developing and implementing strategies to reduce the impact of gun violence in their cities. And then I came back home and to do this work during what might be the worst time to do this job.
Right.
But I believe that I'm here on purpose and for purpose. And I hope that I can lead an amazing team that I do have to make some substantial changes in the issues that impact our communities.
Well, Erica Atwood, we've run out of time, but it's been a delight to talk with you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. This has been an amazing opportunity.
And to our viewers, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.